Godzilla comes from the mind of Ishiro Honda. It is one of the most famous Japanese movies ever made, and today we are covering it on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Golden Hour Film Podcast. My name is Harry Bailey. I'm joined by my co-host, our guest host, Shane Mulvaney. Shane, how are you?
I'm doing very well. Looking forward to getting into Godzilla. The OG Godzilla. I have seen the 2014 version. I think Gareth Edwards, if I'm not mistaken, made.
The Bryan Cranston one.
Bryan Cranston, Elizabeth Olsen, Aaron Taylor-Johnson. Yeah, it's pretty good actually. I remember enjoying it. I haven't seen it since it came out though, really. But yeah, this is obviously... And actually Godzilla Minus One from a couple of years ago was class as well.
Unbelievable movie, so
Class movie.
the first Godzilla movie to win an Oscar somehow.
Yeah. So, but this, this is obviously the OG. And we'll get into how it stacks up and how much it inspired out of our future iterations.
Yeah, this is very much inspired by King Kong, which we covered 2 weeks ago. The effects designers themselves said that they were massive King Kong fans. Ishiro Honda would even go on and direct a King Kong versus Godzilla movie. So if you want to go and check out the episode where we covered King Kong, go check that out after as well. But yes, Godzilla, covering the most obvious and famous base of all, it is a very clear and obvious metaphor for the incidences that happened at the end of World War II in Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the fallout of that, the politics behind it, and it does, I think, a very, very, very good job of weaving in other smaller metaphors about that same thing in through some of the characters. It's an incredible movie. Unlike King Kong, because I feel like we're going to maybe do a bit of comparing and contrasting. Unlike King Kong, it is not a movie comprised of stop motion. This film actually has someone playing Godzilla. Yes, Ishiro Honda was a fan of... first of all, this spawned the Kaiju genre, which is now one of the most famous genres in all of Japanese cinema, where, essentially a big monster wrecks a city. And this is the OG Kaiju movie as far as they are concerned. But as well, Ishiro Honda, as well as other famous Kaiju directors, all loved the idea of someone wearing a suit, because it's safe to say that as charming as the stop motion effects are in King Kong, they are a little bit dated. What I will say, maybe besides a couple of the close-ups of the face, is that it's hard to see very, if any, effects in this movie that have aged poorly at all.
I agree, yeah.
All the effects, there's a couple of planes that you can see are on a string, but 95% of the effects in this look amazing still. Shout out to Katsumi Tezuka, who played Godzilla. That was the man in the suit who was wrecking up all those cities, which, as far as I'm aware from what I've read, was a ball ache to make, because supposedly they made a city and then he trampled the city and then they watched back and the physics was just off. It just looked off. I think maybe did they have the buildings empty or something, and when he was standing on them you could see they were models or whatever. So they had to go back and reconstruct the city, but then put stuff in the building so that when the buildings then collapsed, it would look more legit. And as much of a ball ache as that was for them, I think it was worth it, because as I said, the effects in this are pretty timeless.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, one of my main notes was that the visual effects are really convincing. As charming as, like you said, the stop motion for King Kong was, you do have to kind of suspend your disbelief to a certain extent. Whereas with this, I agree, 90%, 95%, it's it just looks convincing. It looks exactly like what they want you to, or what they want it to actually look like, which is a city being destroyed and absolutely torn to shreds by this massive lizard slash dinosaur. I know they kind of refer to him a few times as a dinosaur in this film, or at least from...
It's kind of like the middleman between the dinosaurs.
Yeah, kind of like...
Civilization.
They say he's kind of from Jurassic era, but they don't actually, I don't think, specifically state that he's a dinosaur. So obviously there's that kind of what exactly is he? And that obviously that's a big question as well throughout the whole film. Is that what actually is he, and how dangerous actually kind of could he be in the end? And obviously we know pretty quickly how dangerous he ends up being.
Yeah, I think as well, I don't think this is an insane thing to say. I think we have both a front runner now for best score or
Oh,
soundtrack, or at least
so
something
good.
in the conversation. And speaking of the conversation, I think this also may rival the conversation for best sound design of the year. The fact that they still use the same roar for Godzilla 70 odd years
Yeah,
later is a testament to how right they got it first time. That roar is so iconic, but also the footsteps, the storms, the sirens, everything sound design wise in this is off the charts. It's amazing. But getting similar to when we were talking about how they got a lot of the Bond formula correct in Doctor No first try, getting the Godzilla roar correct like first try in what would go on to be 30 plus movies, and like if you include kaiju movies, hundreds of movies, getting it right first try is insane. Now, the Godzilla theme that you're all thinking of, the one that Pharaoh Monch sampled for Simon Says, which Samoa Joe used to come out to, that's actually not in this movie, weirdly enough. That doesn't come until Godzilla versus Mothra in 64. That being said, the theme song to this movie is unbelievable.
yeah, 100%. And you mentioned Bond there. It also kind of obviously Nosferatu and Dracula come from the same source material, but the fact that both of those films kind of like nailed pretty much what they wanted to do first time, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
set the stage for a bunch of different adaptations of the same source material essentially. So yeah, I think we can also kind of bring that in, but I totally agree. It's like it'd be very easy to kind of muck it up, or at least even get some stuff right, but then maybe get some stuff wrong, and that has to be refined. But they pretty much nailed it. Both, I think, the look and you are completely right to say that the sound effects, but also just the look of Godzilla. Like he looks terrifying. He does. He looks
Mm-hmm.
like just an absolute behemoth to behold.
Yeah, this would have been a real. Again, we said this in King Kong, but this would have been an insane experience. I would have said being in Japan, seeing this in the cinema. Obviously, this comes out just 9 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and like there's a lot of sentiment in this movie that very blatantly ties back to that. Obviously, everyone says that it's a metaphor, but like things like them having to evacuate the city, and characters are like, "Oh my god, like another evacuation," obviously alluding to those bombs. There's a lot of things like that. The fact that Godzilla came about because of Japan testing H bombs in the sea,
Yeah,
basically displacing Godzilla from its home, and Godzilla now coming to wreck shit as a result. There's a lot of like consequences of your actions, but also the fact that the public and innocent civilians are the ones who are suffering as a result, and then them having to abandon their lives and evacuate the city. It's it's very blatant, but that being said, it's still done very well. It's genuinely one of the most famous movie metaphors ever. I think is Godzilla being a metaphor for Hiroshima and Nagasaki, but it's done really really well, and the way they build to it as well is incredible. The way they build suspense in the opening scenes where we just see ships plummeting, and we hear one guy who said it's like one sole survivor says that the sea just exploded and then he dies. Like this, they really build up the suspension for when we do eventually meet Godzilla. But with the building of suspension and everything, we are very much anticipating Godzilla. When we do then get to the human characters, we obviously get the incredible Dr. Yamane, and the reason I say he's incredible is because he's played by icon Takashi Shimura, who we've already covered before in Seven Samurai. But besides him, I think the biggest flaw this movie has, and the only real flaw this movie has, is the
yeah,
shoehorned in love triangle. It's the
totally agree.
human element of this film with regards to like the main characters, so to speak, other than Godzilla and Shimura's character, where it just kind of loses me. I do wonder, is that just them forcing a love triangle into a movie to try and get young people to go and see it or something? But
It
yeah,
felt
it's
very
the only
Hitchcock.
thing. It's the only thing for me that this movie loses me on, is that forced love triangle for no reason.
I totally agree. It feels very Hitchcock, where Hitchcock, you'd have a really great kind of storyline or a really great premise for a thriller, and then you just have this shoehorned in love maybe not necessarily a love triangle, but certainly a love kind of duo, or like a duo that they wanted to care about from a romantic point of view, and you never really do. But yeah, I do agree that that's the only kind of thing that lets it down, really. Speaking of which, I know it kind of is a metaphor, obviously, for the Nagasaki and Hiroshima atomic bombs, but also it's not really a metaphor either. They do specifically talk about that like multiple
Yeah.
times throughout the movie, and also I think there's a character in this Daisuke Serizawa, who's like the kind of like a scientist slash investigator, whatever you want to call him, but he obviously eventually comes up with a solution to defeat the problem, and then he has this whole moral conundrum as to like, if I
Mm-hmm.
do this, then then it's out in the world, like that it's gonna then be used for evil. So obviously, like it doesn't take a a big stretch of the imagination to kind
Yeah.
of draw parallels with J. Robert Oppenheimer and like what he
Yes.
didn't do, which was he didn't have a backbone to say, "Nah, fuck that." Like, I'm not being part of this. Obviously, so then obviously. Yeah, it's dealing with that whole kind of thing as well. It's like you said, it's not very subtle and it's not very it's definitely quite in your face, but I don't think that distracts from what it's trying to do either. I don't think it distracts from the final result because it's this is less than a decade after obviously World War Two and after the atomic bomb. So like that would have been very much fresh in the minds of the people making it and the audiences back then, not just in Japan but around the world. So yeah, I don't think it detracts from it at all.
Yeah, I think everything that happens on Odo Island is fascinating. It's obviously a place that they return to in the franchise, but initially, this is where the sound design really works for me, as well as like just the opening credits. They just flex the sound design. Like in the
Yeah,
opening credits, you hear Godzilla's footsteps and his roar and stuff, and they're just like, yeah, we're just gonna like throw everything at you without you seeing it, take it all away from you, and then just like slowly but surely build up to it throughout the movie, which is genius. But everything on Odo Island is amazing. Basically, to begin with, there's this massive storm, and like places are getting wrecked. And for like an outsider, it wouldn't be insane to think that it's the storm that's wrecking the place. But what we quickly realize from inside this one person's house is that Godzilla's footsteps are outside. People end up going missing. Everything goes wrong. They also insinuate the elders, like the oldest of the elders. Again, another huge parallel between King Kong and Godzilla. Suggested it is Godzilla, who is like an old Japanese myth, who they used to send a young girl, similar to King Kong, on a raft out to sea, and that would keep Godzilla at bay. Literally the same as King Kong. Um, so these elders have heard of Godzilla through stories, but like the young people are kind of like, oh, like what are you on about? There's
yeah,
literally no such thing as a giant dinosaur. Lo and behold, that giant dinosaur rocks up to Odo Island, and everyone meets him for the first time, and he scares the bejesus out of everyone and leaves some massive tracks in the sand, and it is amazing. They really don't lay out all their cards early. They really build up
yeah,
to it. It's first of all we see destruction, then we hear footsteps, then we see Godzilla, but Godzilla leaves, and then from then Godzilla has no problem wrecking shit in Tokyo. My God, does Godzilla go to town on that city? It's wild, the destruction that happens. But for as amazing as the effects are and how like genuinely incredible it looks when the city is literally on fire and Godzilla is walking through it, like those shots look great. They also tie in a lot of like actual genuine human emotion. Again, very blatantly suggesting that this is what was happening during those bombs. There's one shot in particular where a woman is holding her three kids, and she says to them that they're going to be with their dad soon, as Godzilla is literally burning down buildings around them. Uh, it's very heartbreaking. We never see them again. So,
yeah,
and it's very much implied that they are some of the many who perish in this attack from Godzilla. But as well, with Shimura's character, who's a zoologist who is totally against the killing of Godzilla because ultimately Godzilla was displaced by humanity.
yeah,
There's also a whole moral quandary there with like, sure, Godzilla's killing all these people, but is Godzilla wrong for it because Godzilla doesn't know any different other than that humans are attacking or were attacking Godzilla, whether knowingly or not, and as a result, Godzilla is retaliating. It's there's a lot in this movie, which is amazing considering like people just associate Godzilla movies as like a big dinosaur wrecking a city. Like a few of them, Godzilla minus one included, have like a lot of really great subtext in them.
Yeah, totally agree. That character, Kyohei, by the way, the zoologist, obviously he's the one who kind of discovers, or at least comes up with what would seem to be the correct assumption that the the radiation that was caused as a result of the atomic
Yeah.
bombs has essentially awoken Godzilla, or at least, like you said, displaced him from his natural habitat. So again, it's like a man-made disaster. Kind of, again, you can talk about your
Mm-hmm.
environmental kind of
Yep.
parallels and stuff like that as well. So it's got all of that kind of stuff going on as well. It's really kind of clever in terms of how it's weaving all of this real world stuff in, obviously. So yeah, it's very like in terms of the script, it's just very very smart. What was the next thing I was going to say? Sorry.
Yeah, there's some great lines in there as well. One of my favorites is when they're asking Shimura's character, Dr. Yamane, like, how does he think that they could kill Godzilla? And obviously, he is very much against killing Godzilla, but he comes out with the line, Godzilla was baptized in the fire of the H bomb. What do you think could kill it? Which is just cold, cold reply.
Yeah, 100%. Sorry, let's look at this. Oh yeah, yeah, and Daisuke eventually, what's his name? Daisuke Serizawa eventually, like I said, this scientist guy, eventually comes up with what he thinks is a way to defeat Godzilla, which is called the Oxygen Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, obviously this incredibly dangerous yet potentially effective device. But yeah, he's obviously going back and forth, and the whole love triangle. We're not even going to mention it. It doesn't really work, to be honest. But obviously, it's a part of another reason why Daisuke is going to going through this moral conundrum, moral quandary, because obviously he wants to kind of have a future with this girl, but then also it's like, right, if I do this, then this thing is out in the world, and I'll be known as the man who invented it, and then I obviously it's going to be then like following him for the rest of his life. So like, do I really want someone else to be a part of that as well? But yeah, then he eventually kind of, after much toing and froing, he burns the blueprints, if you want to call it that, the plans.
Mm-hmm.
So that really, it's only up in his head. It's only in his brain that it'll actually exist. And then obviously, once we get to the kind of once the kind of final act starts to kick in, you really kind of understand what his actual end game is here. It's like, right, I don't want anyone else to have this. I don't want any foreign government or Japanese government or any potential kind of people to use this for harm in future. But obviously, in this one instance, this we really need to use it right now, because otherwise everyone will die. So I'm the only person who actually knows how to build this thing and how to actually utilize it. And then obviously we get into his kind of his final act, as where his final
Mm-hmm.
frontier.
Yeah, he's an interesting character, but again, I feel like he's just shoehorned into a stupid, pointless love triangle. The other two
It's dumb.
characters involved in that love triangle are totally non-characters. I don't think either of their performances are memorable.
No.
Somehow on Letterboxd, and not to go off Letterboxd, but somehow on Letterboxd, they're the top two billed actors in the movie, which is hilarious. I can't imagine that was the case in the credits, but I didn't actually pay attention to it. I just assumed Shimura was first billed, but yeah, he's shoehorned into this bizarre love triangle that means nothing.
No.
He is an interesting character, as you say, because of his moral quandary and like the clear and obvious Oppenheimer comparisons. But yeah, he ends up kind of getting his arc, so to speak. So if you were to pinpoint any character from that love triangle worth remembering, he's the only one. And he actually gets a fully fleshed out arc in this film with the ending. But just on the destruction as well, it's amazingly shot, because whenever he kind of goes through this whole moral crisis as to whether he should use it or not, we get this montage that he sees on the radio where basically this whole group of like young girls are singing for the fallen after like we see all the destruction and devastation before, where Godzilla wrecks a radio tower with a load of innocent civilians on it. He destroys a train. He mows through power lines. Like just flips a bridge for no reason. Like on his way out, he kind of turns and looks at it and goes, fuck it. Throws the bridge. Like all sorts of destruction. And what Honda does really well in this is he shows you the destruction, but then he shows you the actual impacts this has. Even in the opening, with the boats capsizing and exploding, the first thing we see immediately after is their families trying to find out who's alive or not. I think Honda really strikes the balance between showing the destruction and the incredible effects, and then, you know, giving us the actual human element of it, which is the effects that this has on civilization. And, you know, people who aren't the main character in this film, who, if this was real life, are still people who are losing loved ones left, right, and center. But yeah, he watches this news program where these young girls in this choir sing, and we basically see clips of all of this and all the wounded and children and everything in hospitals, and it's genuinely very powerful. There's a lot of very powerful moments in the scene in this movie, I should say, but this is probably the biggest one for me, is that montage. And yeah, it spurs him to use this oxygen destroyer, which again they kind of make into a bit of an event because of morbid curiosity. Everybody wants to be there for the day that they destroy Godzilla. And what do? And again, with that character who created the oxygen destroyer, Eye Patch Guy 2.0, they bring the oxygen destroyer. He says, well, actually it needs to be brought down and like opened underwater, which like we who have seen it know that means he's going to sacrifice himself. But that other guy in the love triangle, for whatever reason, tries to shoehorn his way into the scene as well. He's like, oh, I need more lines. I'll swim down with you and whatever. We get the silly love triangle thing. But what actually happens is a very impactful. He sacrifices himself with his own invention, and at least in his head anyway, he sacrificed himself with this invention, with the blueprints destroyed. So as far as he's aware, it'll never be touched or used again. It's not going to be added to humanity's arsenal, as he says, and he successfully turns Godzilla into dust. Whilst Godzilla is asleep and defenseless, may I add, you coward. But yeah, he successfully turns Godzilla into dust, and that is the end of Godzilla, or at least for this movie.
Yeah, because Kyohei, sorry to cut across you, because Kyohei does say that we can't say for sure whether this is like, he's the only one that has existed of a species that might arise. I don't know, like there was a sequel come out maybe a couple of years after this. Haven't actually seen it. I don't know if you have.
6 months after.
6 months, wow. Okay.
6 months. Honda had nothing to do with it, and it sucks.
And is that the same? I presume it's a different Godzilla, is it?
I actually don't remember. I haven't watched it in ages, but it has none of this.
Yeah, okay.
It's not good. 6 months after the sequel came out, Honda had nothing to do with it.
But also, like, there's a picture of not a picture. There's a sequence of a TV reporter being like, "Oh, we've defeated the enemy. He'll never arise again." And it's like, right, it's clearly setting up for a sequel where all of a sudden Godzilla arises out of nowhere. Like, so obviously, but like you said, this is the last we see of Godzilla for now. So
yes,
yeah,
to be continued.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Shane, this was obviously your first time seeing this film. Yeah, because like obviously with Godzilla, a film like this, it's a film that literally everyone's heard of. What were you expecting, and what met your expectations, and then what happened, or what in this film did you not expect at all?
I definitely expected some really good visual effects, which we got. I definitely expected a lot of like metaphors and straight up parallels between obviously the Second World War and obviously the 2 atomic bombs in Japan, which obviously we get. I didn't expect. Let me see. What didn't I expect? I didn't expect it to be quite as emotionally hard hitting as it was at times. Like there's a scene with a choir where they're kind of it's at the kind of lowest ebb, where there's a choir of children kind of singing this song in harmony, obviously, and they're kind of almost preparing for what could be the end. It's almost like the War of the Worlds from last week, where they're all in church and stuff, expecting the end to be, well, except good. It's like a good version of
Yeah.
that. It's like if that was actually effective. So yeah, that was quite good, and obviously I think Godzilla -1 did that very well as well, where it was quite emotional, like it balanced the emotion and the kind of the destruction and the impressive visual effects quite well. Um, Overall, I gave it 3.5 stars, but it's a very good 3.5 stars. Like in terms of, I did really enjoy it. I think it's really effective for what it is. Like I said, it's quite emotionally hard hitting, especially towards the end. Once we realise that Daisuke is going to sacrifice himself and essentially do what the Americans didn't do, which was yeah, they didn't need to use those bombs. Obviously, we all know that. They did it because they wanted to send a message. Those people didn't need to die, so obviously Daisuke is kind of doing what needs to be done, but he's also going to do what they didn't do and sacrifice himself so that it can't then be used for ill in future. So yeah, it's quite hard hitting in those moments. But yeah, it's really I was really impressed by obviously what was served up.
Yeah, it's a real interesting movie as well because Honda himself was a pacifist who got conscripted into the war 3 times in World War II. He kept getting redrafted back into the war again. When Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened, he was actually in a Chinese prisoner of war camp being tortured. And like when they were torturing, they told him, "Oh, by the way, your whole country's been decimated and blown to bits, and loads of people who you love are all dead now." So that was something that he had to deal with, and he himself said that he never ever got over that whole experience. Which, like, how the fuck could you? In fairness, what the hell? But yeah, I had seen this before, and on a rewatch, I preferred it. I think if you go into the film knowing that there's like a 15-minute interlude about a silly love triangle and you just focus on everything else, you will come out of this having an amazing time. This movie is packed with incredible effects, really hard hitting moments, really emotional moments, and just the historical context of the film is, it's very rare that something like that would happen. Like it really is a special movie. I can't imagine how special it is or was for people in Japan at that time when this came out. I'd say this is a one of one experience being in Japan, seeing this come out for the first time in the cinema. I gave it 4 stars. Absolutely loved it. Couldn't recommend it enough. We will probably never cover Godzilla raids again on the podcast because I don't see the point in it. But if there is any of the sort of classic kaiju movies you would love to see us cover on the podcast, do let us know. The likes of Ghidorah or Mothra or Destroy All Monsters or King Kong versus Godzilla or Godzilla versus Mecha Godzilla, because they are all supposedly, I haven't seen any of them yet, but they are all supposedly very fun films from the 60s and onwards, that could be worth covering on the podcast. So if you've any interest in any of them, do let us know. But yeah, for now, Godzilla. It's the first foreign language film we've covered in a while.
Yeah,
First Japanese film we've covered in a while as well. Which is funny because we actually have covered a fair few foreign language films this year in comparison to last year. But yeah, just worth noting, it's the first foreign language film we've covered in a while.
since maybe
So I have say it again,
umbrellas
sorry?
since maybe Umbrellas of Cherbourg, maybe I want to say potentially.
It would have been since the Yes We Can arc. So you're probably right, yeah. If it wasn't Umbrellas of Cherbourg, there was only one after it. But I think it might have been Umbrellas of Cherbourg. But yeah, I've put together a world cinema playlist of all the foreign language and poaching episodes of the podcast that we have covered. So, if you're not coming to the podcast looking for classic Hollywood or film noir or whatever, you're looking for something, from somewhere else, we've a whole playlist for it. We've covered a bunch of international classics and poaching. So, feel free to have a look at that playlist. And feel free to check out all of the short form content we've been putting out recently, because it is about that time of year where we kind of ramp up the views and subscribers on YouTube again. So, if you're listening to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever, we do post not just the podcast, but other videos on our YouTube channel too, if you ever want to check them out. In the meantime, though, Shane, have you watched anything recently that you want to talk about? Because I certainly have.
Yeah, I've seen a few. So we obviously covered the original Italian Job on the podcast last month during Heists of the Century. And I watched the remake directed by F. Gary Gray, starring Donald Sutherland, Mark Wahlberg, Charlize Theron, and Edward Norton. I've seen it before. I saw it as a kid. It's definitely not a terrible remake by any means, but it's not as good as the original. But there's some good stuff in there, some good action sequences and car sequences. Highest to lowest, I know you saw this at Cannes, actually. Very weird film.
I'm so glad when I read your review that it was what it said that it was, because I had this opinion at Cannes, and then all the reviews have been the total opposite to my opinion, and you are the first person I've read to agree with me. About the made-for-TV music, the fact that A$AP Rocky is weirdly the best part of the movie, the fact that Denzel is only really trying in like certain scenes, but when he does, he's great, but mainly when he's opposite A$AP Rocky. It's a bizarre movie. I probably underrated it, but that's just because it was the first film at Cannes that I saw in IMAX, and I was so excited for it. And when I got this, it was just like a lead balloon. I was like, oh.
The score.
Anyway, Shane.
The score is shockingly bad. It's like
it's bad.
It's 90s network TV. It's so over the top. Doesn't need to be what it is. I get Spike uses music to really great effect usually in his films, and actually there's a couple of moments in this where like actual rap songs, not necessarily the score, but rap songs are used quite well.
That's exactly what I said. The score is shite and the soundtrack is class.
Exactly, yeah. And A$AP Rocky, like he's not in it until a certain point in the film, but once he comes into it, like he's really good, man. He's really good. I did not expect him to be as good as he is. And like you said, Denzel locks in. You can see Denzel being like, I can't be shown up by this guy. He kind of like, Jeffrey Wright doesn't get as much to do as I would want because he's so great. Jeffrey Wright, he's so great all the time. Doesn't really get much to do, and I also think as well, because obviously it's obviously High and Low, the Kurosawa film, is based on a novel, so this isn't a remake of High and Low, it's a remake of the same novel, but it kind of is a remake of the film, let's be honest, because obviously it's High and Low. So what I loved about the moral conundrum in the Kurosawa film is, and this, I guess it's maybe a slight spoiler, so I apologize for this, but Toshiro Mifune's character in that is like a really hard ass. He's just a bit of a dickhead. Let's be honest. He's a bit He's like a merciless businessman, and his driver in that he doesn't have any affection towards. So when a certain scene in that happens, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers, but when a certain scene,
it makes sense.
If it makes sense as to why he's like, I don't really know what I have to do here. I don't know. I don't want to do it. I know I kind of have to do it, but I don't want to do it. Why should I? Whereas in this, he's pretty much best mates with Jeffrey Wright's character. Their two sons are best mates. It's like they've... So I didn't at any point buy that he wasn't going to do this.
He switches up so fast. Whatever the script tells him to.
Yeah, it's like at no point did I buy that he would not do the thing that everyone wants him to do and that he should do and morally is the right thing to do. Because like, you've kind of kneecapped him, you've kind of taken away the actual interesting part of the moral conundrum. But like, leave all that stuff aside, I do think it suffers because of that. But leaving that stuff aside, there are still some good moments. There's a great train sequence. There's a great scene set in a Puerto Rican kind of parade, and it's like this whole kind of thing where it's discombobulating, it's kind of throwing the cops off the scent and stuff, and it's definitely a more interesting kind of heist, because it kind of is a heist in a way. It's definitely a kind of more of an interesting heist than obviously the original film was. But yeah, I do think the final act there's some really great stuff in there, but overall I wouldn't necessarily a letdown, but it's I think recent Spike has been very good, but this has been like a slight downgrade, I think, on what we've got in the last few years with like Black Klansman and The Five Bloods. I do think it's not quite on their level. Brighton Rock is a noir from England, actually, from post-war England.
Oh yeah.
Really pretty good actually. I had a good time. Richard Attenborough plays a pretty dastardly gangster, a wannabe gangster
Mm-hmm.
called Pinky Brown. Yeah, it's worth the watch, I think. The Roses is a rom. Well, it's actually not really a rom com. It's a comedy. It's not really rom actually at all because it's about a married couple who they fall out of love fast and they eventually end up despising each other. And starring Olivia Colman, the great Olivia Colman, and Benedict Cumberbatch as this obviously married couple. I think it is a remake of an American movie from the 80s, which I haven't seen. But I think it's Michael Douglas might be in it and Kathleen Turner, I want to say. It's quite funny. It's really funny actually, and like Olivia Colman's just such a comedic assassin. She's so funny in everything she does. Yeah, it's definitely worth the watch. I had a good time with that. And then the recent, or the latest, I should say, Darren Aronofsky film. By no means would I say Darren Aronofsky is a director who, he's not a laugh a minute director, and I wouldn't say this is like a funny film. It's not really a comedy. It's a drama which has comedic elements, but compared to most of his work, it's a riot. It's like very. Think of like Black Swan, or think of like the wrestler. Yeah, it's like they're not like they're quite dour, tonally. With good effect. Don't get me wrong, they're good films, obviously, but yeah, they're not like trying to make you laugh at any point. But this is like there's definitely some humorous moments in this, but it's quite uncut gems in its kind of in its tone and in its kind of plot developments. Like it's throwing Austin Butler's character in some really difficult situations that it's like once he gets one thing kind of worked out, then another even worse thing happens that he has to deal with, and then two other things crop up. It's like he's just constantly put through the ringer in this film, both physically and emotionally. So definitely a star vehicle for him, but he really rose to the challenge, and I had a good time again with it. So yeah, that's what I've watched. I think some films that might be still out in cinemas actually, that I would recommend some people check out.
Cool. I have been watching, obviously, funnily enough, as of recording this, you probably won't believe that this is how ahead of the plan we are with the podcast, but I've been watching a lot of Marilyn Monroe films for that 12 Marilyn Monroe movies everyone should see list that came out over a month ago. But yes, first and foremost, How to Marry a Millionaire. Obviously, I talk about all these in that video, so go watch that video. How to Marry a Millionaire, though, is unreal. I really, really enjoyed it. Lauren Bacall is like definitely the best performance in the movie, and I think that William Powell is also very good, and it makes me want to watch The Thin Man now. I think he's brilliant. But Marilyn Monroe in this comedy movie is definitely the funniest performance. She is fucking gas in this movie. She was so underrated for her comedic ability, and yeah, in this movie she is no different. She's fantastic. It's about three women who kind of come up with this scheme between the three of them that at least one of them is gonna marry a millionaire, so that the three of them can all reap the rewards of it. They all end up going down very different paths, shall we say, and yeah, there's a lot of gags. It's very fun, very enjoyable movie from a director who I've heard of, whose name I struggle to pronounce. Jean Negulesco. He's the guy who did the old Titanic movie, the one with that famous British actor in it, Clifton Webb and Barbara Stanwyck. Clifton Webb wasn't British, was he? Have I made that up?
Clifton Webb, is he from Laura? Yeah, I was going to say,
yeah.
I think he is British, yeah.
Yeah, and Thelma Ritter's in it too, and every movie could do with Thelma Ritter.
Yeah.
After How to Marry a Millionaire, I then watched Clash by Night, which makes me even more need to make a 12 Barbara Stanwyck movies everyone should see, because I came for Marilyn Monroe, but I stayed for Barbara Stanwyck. It's directed by Fritz Lang. It's really dark. Again, similar to my 12 Marilyn Monroe movies everyone should see. I can't really discuss the plot of this movie without this episode of the podcast getting censored. It is some very dark source material, let's just say, about the lives of couples at home, with some unbelievable performances. But when it's Fritz Lang, he's so good at taking these really dark elements in a film directing the shit out of them and then twisting them in a way that you can't help but watch, because there's always like either there's a character who doesn't know something's happening, or as the audience we don't know what's happening next. The film does such an interesting job of keeping you hooked. But Barbara Stanwyck's performance is amazing, and I have to say, like, straight up shout out to Robert Ryan, who I also saw not that long ago in Crossfire. Robert Ryan, from the two movies of his that I've seen, is already one of the greatest on-screen bastards I've ever seen. He is in both of those movies. He is so convincing as a despicable, and I'm sure he's a lovely bloke in real life. I know nothing about him, but in both of those films, he puts in two unbelievable performances, two disgusting, despicable characters. He is so good at making you hate him just by his mannerisms or by the way he delivers a line. I know a lot of it's also like how the characters are written. He's played two very well written characters, but my God, can that guy get you to hate him on screen? He does such a good job. I then watched The Misfits, which is such a surreal movie. It's similar to Godzilla. The Misfits is like a real moment in time in cinema history, because it comes out, it's the last movie of Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe. Clark Gable dies days before it comes out. Marilyn Monroe dies a year after it comes out. And the other two stars of the movie, Thelma Ritter, would pass away a few years after, as would Montgomery Clift. Like, it's just, and it's such a bleak movie, and everyone in it is like suffering from mental health issues. And this comes out in the early 60s, so it's very ahead of its time. It's directed by John Huston. He directs the fuck out of it. It's in black and white, but like what he does with it, similar to Psycho. It's like, it's funny seeing a 60s movie in black and white, but it's clearly a stylistic choice, because it just looks unbelievable. Those scenes at the end in the desert are incredible. That scene in particular, where Marilyn Monroe, without spoiling anything, is like ages away from the lads in the desert screaming at them, is like so haunting. And as well, like, it's written by Arthur Miller, and he initially wrote the film as a love letter to, initially wrote the play as like a love letter to Marilyn Monroe, but again, he and Marilyn Monroe would divorce as the movie was being made whilst he was working on set, and then he was then like seeing someone else on set. Like, it's such a hard movie to watch, but oh my God, can I just say that Clark Gable puts every fucking fiber of his being into his performance here. Now, people would say that like the heart attack he had was maybe caused by the fact that he insisted on doing almost all of his own stunts in this movie, but he puts everything into it. And again, in the same way that it's so interesting that Marilyn Monroe, whilst this is happening to her, is playing a character who is a woman who is coming out of a nasty divorce. Clark Gable plays a character who's an aging cowboy at the end of his career who doesn't know what to do with himself. It's such a surreal experience to watch it when you have all the context. But yeah, Clark Gable puts in one of the greatest performances of his entire career in his final performance. You can just tell that he put everything into it. It's insane. I then watched Ladies of the Chorus, which is the first film that Marilyn Monroe starred in. I'll be honest, it's not great. I'm not going to talk about it very much. Go watch that video if you want to hear me talk about it a bit more. And then I watched a couple of horror movies. I watched Urban Legend, which is a movie I'd always kind of meant to get around to. I didn't realize it was so heavily Scream inspired. It's real camp. It's real silly. Is it particularly good? No, it's so predictable, but it is fun. Jared Leto puts in a fun performance in this film, a young Jared Leto. But yeah, it's by no means the greatest horror movie ever made. It's not even an amazing horror movie, but it's certainly a fun one. Like, it's a good one to pass the time in the build up to Halloween, shall I say. And then last but not least, I watched a horror movie from one of the great horror directors, Wes Craven. I watched The Hills Have Eyes for the first time. And yeah, Wes, I haven't seen The Last House on the Left yet, but Wes had that sauce early. My God, is this movie dark? Is it disturbing? It's fantastic. It gets compared to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In my honest opinion, I definitely don't think it's anywhere. It's a very good movie, but like Texas Chainsaw Massacre for me is genuinely like one of the greatest movies of all time. So it definitely is not on the level of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That being said, it is like Southern horror. We meet a family of cannibals. It is a lot more about the atmosphere of the movie. It relies more on atmosphere and like general creepiness than jump scares, which is always something I prefer. Is like for a horror movie to unsettle you rather than like startle you. I love an unsettling horror movie, and this unsettles you from the off. Uh, yeah, it's gas because Wes didn't want to make any more horror movies after Last House on the Left. And then he ended up having to make this because it was all that he could get made. And then he ended up being one of the greatest directors in the history of the genre. So, happy accidents, I guess. But yeah, Wes Craven's second outing is really, really great Southern horror film. But yeah, for people who say that it's on the same level as Texas Chainsaw Massacre, you're having a laugh. You're in fairness, you are listening to someone who probably would consider Texas Chainsaw Massacre to maybe be the greatest horror movie of all time, if not top 3. So like, nah, not having it. It's very, very good though. But yeah, that's everything I've watched recently. And next week, guess who's back? Back again. Hitchcock's back. Tell a friend. It's The Birds. Tippi Hedren, The Birds. Again, talk about, famous things in movies. One of the most famous movies of all time for the backstage shenanigans and incidences that would happen, the fallouts, the arguments, and all that, the stunts and whatever. It is a film that people could literally talk about for hours, and we're probably going to end up doing that next week. But for now, this has been the episode of the Golden Hour Film Podcast where we we very much knew about it already, everyone does. We discussed Ishiro Honda's Godzilla from 1954. Next week, Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds. And we'll see you all then. Thank you very much. I have been Harry Bailey.
I've been Shin Vaughn.
Goodbye.